The San Francisco fog rolled in thick that Tuesday afternoon as Marcus Chun fumbled with his keys at the front door of his Pacific Heights townhouse. The business trip to Tokyo had been cut short when their biggest clients suddenly pulled out of the deal, leaving Marcus exhausted and frustrated. All he wanted was a hot shower, and maybe some of Alana's famous empanadas that she sometimes left in the fridge with little sticky notes in her careful handwriting. Elena Rodriguez had been his housekeeper for 8 months now. Ever since his divorce from Jessica had left him rattling around the 4-bedroom house like a lost soul. The domestic agency had sent several candidates, but Elena was different. She was professional without being cold, thorough without being intrusive, and somehow managed to make his sterile bachelor pad feel like a home again. As Marcus pushed open the front door, he expected to find the usual pristine silence that greeted him after Elena's Tuesday deep cleaning sessions. Instead, he heard something that made him freeze in the marble foyer soft, muffled sobbing coming from upstairs. His first instinct was to call out, but something in the desperate quality of the crying made him hesitate. Marcus had heard plenty of tears during his marriage's final months, but this was different. This was the sound of someone trying very hard not to be heard, someone who had found what they thought was a private place to fall apart. Following the sound up the curved staircase, Marcus realized it was coming from his master bedroom, more specifically from his walk-in closet. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, he could see Elena sitting on the floor between his hanging suits, her dark hair falling forward as she clutched what looked like an official letter. In her shaking hands, "Elena?" he said softly, not wanting to startle her. The crying stopped immediately. Marcus heard a sharp intake of breath, followed by frantic rustling as she tried to compose herself. When she emerged from the closet moments later, her usually neat appearance was disheveled. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she was hastily shoving the letter into her purse. "Mr. Chun," she said, her voice thick with tears she was trying to suppress. "I'm so sorry. I thought you weren't coming back until Thursday. I was just finishing up, and Elena, what's wrong?" Marcus interrupted, taking a step closer. That's when he saw the dark purple bruises on her forearm, partially hidden by the sleeve she was now tugging down nervously. Nothing at all," she said quickly, backing toward the bedroom door. "I should go. Sophia will be wondering where I am." Sophia was Elena's 8-year-old daughter, whom Marcus had met briefly a few times when Elena had to bring her along during school holidays. The little girl had her mother's warm brown eyes and shy smile, and she'd been fascinated by Marcus's collection of vintage comic books. "Elena, please," Marcus said, his voice gentler now. "You are crying in my closet. Clearly something is very wrong. And those bruises on your arm." "I fell," Elena said immediately, but the words came out too fast, too rehearsed. "I'm clumsy sometimes. Really, Mr. Chun, I need to go." She was almost to the bedroom door when Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives. Instead of letting her flee, he stepped sideways, not blocking her path, but making it clear. He wasn't going to pretend he hadn't seen her distress. "Elena, in the 8 months you've worked for me, I've never seen you break so much as a coffee cup. You're the least clumsy person I know." Marcus ran a hand through his black hair, a gesture Elena had learned meant he was thinking carefully about his words. "Look, I know I'm just your employer, and maybe I'm overstepping, but if someone is hurting you—" "No one is hurting me," Elena said, but her voice cracked on the words. She was still clutching her purse against her chest like a shield, and Marcus could see her hands trembling. "Then why were you hiding in my closet to cry?" he asked quietly. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the spacious bedroom. Elena's brown eyes were filled with a mixture of fear, shame, and something else Marcus couldn't quite identify. Finally, she sank down onto the edge of his bed, her shoulders sagging with defeat. "Because," she whispered, "it's the only place. Sophia can't see me fall apart." Marcus felt something twist in his chest at the raw pain in her voice. Whatever was happening in Elena's life, it was serious enough that she'd been using his closet as a refuge, timing her breakdowns for when. She thought he wouldn't be home. The revelation made him realize how little he actually knew about the woman who had quietly become such an important part of his daily life. "Elena," he said, moving slowly to sit in the armchair across from her. "Whatever's wrong, maybe I can help." She looked up at him with tear-filled eyes, and for the first time since he'd known her, Elena Rodriguez looked completely vulnerable. "You can't help with this, Mr. Chun. No one can." But as Marcus looked at the bruises on her arm and remembered the official letter she'd been clutching, he made another decision. Elena had spent months taking care of his home and in many ways taking care of him. Now it was time to return the favor, whether she wanted him to or not. The next morning, Marcus found himself checking his phone every few minutes, wondering if Elena would show up for her regular Thursday cleaning schedule. When she knocked on his door at exactly 9 a.m., he felt a relief he hadn't expected. "Good morning, Mr. Chun," Elena said, her voice carefully neutral. She'd covered the bruises with a long-sleeved cardigan despite the warm September day, and her makeup couldn't quite hide the lingering puffiness around her eyes. "Elena, about yesterday," Marcus began, but she cut him off with a raised hand. "I'd prefer we don't discuss yesterday," she said firmly. "I have your laundry to finish, and the kitchen needs deep cleaning." For 2 hours, Marcus watched her work with her usual efficiency, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she jumped slightly whenever her phone buzzed. Finally, around 11, the doorbell rang. Elena froze, her face going pale. "Expecting someone?" Marcus asked, but Elena was already backing toward the kitchen, her eyes wide with something that looked like panic dot through the front window. Marcus could see a middle-aged man in a police uniform, but this didn't look like an official. "Visit." The man was smiling and carrying what appeared to be coffee and pastries. "That's Detective Murphy," Elena said quietly when Marcus looked at her questioningly. "He's a friend. Could you let him in?" Detective James Murphy was a stocky Irishman with kind eyes and graying temples. He embraced Elena gently when he saw her, like a father greeting a daughter. "How are you holding up, Mia?" he asked, using the Spanish endearment with the ease of long practice. "I'm managing," Elena replied, but Marcus could see her composure starting to crack again. "Elena told me what happened Tuesday," Murphy said, turning to Marcus. "She's been beating herself up about breaking down at work, but honestly, I'm surprised she's held it together this long." "Held what together?" Marcus asked, looking between them. Elena sank into one of his kitchen chairs, suddenly looking exhausted. "Detective Murphy has been helping me with a situation. Elena's ex-husband David has been making threats," Murphy explained, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Custody threats, financial threats, physical threats. She's been fighting a legal battle for months while trying to protect her daughter." "Sophia doesn't know how bad things are," Elena said quietly. "She thinks Daddy just wants to visit more often. She doesn't know about the letters he sends, or the times he follows us, or the court papers saying he wants full custody." Marcus felt anger building in his chest. "He's the one who gave you those bruises." Elena nodded, not meeting his eyes. "He cornered me at Sophia's school last week. Said if I didn't drop the restraining order, he'd make sure I never saw her again. He has money now, a new job, a fiancée who looks good on paper. His lawyer says I'm an unfit mother because I work multiple jobs." "Multiple jobs?" Marcus asked, confused. "I clean houses for 3 other families besides you," Elena admitted. and I work weekends at a hotel downtown. The legal fees are ... substantial. Murphy leaned forward. David Torres is a master manipulator. He's convinced himself that he deserves Sophia, and he's using every psychological trick in the book to wear Elena down. The crying in your closet? That's Elena trying to keep her daughter from seeing her fear. Why my closet specifically? Marcus asked. Elena's cheeks flushed. It's quiet, and it smells like your cologne. Somehow that made me feel ... safer. I know how that sounds. It sounds like you needed a safe space, and you found one, Marcus said simply. The question is, what can we do to make sure you don't need to hide anymore? Murphy smiled grimly. That's what we've been working on, but David's escalating. Yesterday's letter was different, more specific threats, mentions of where Sophia goes to school, details about Elena's work schedule. He's watching them. Then we need to watch him back, Marcus said, surprising himself with the determination in his voice. Elena looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Mr. Chun, you don't understand what you're saying. David is dangerous when he doesn't get his way. I can't ask you to get involved in this. You're not asking, Marcus replied. I'm offering. And please, call me Marcus. After yesterday, I think we're past formalities. Murphy studied Marcus with the assessing gaze of a veteran cop. This isn't a game, son. David Torres has already shown he's willing to hurt Elena to get what he wants. If you're serious about helping, you need to understand what you're signing up for. Marcus thought about Elena sitting in his closet, trying to muffle her sobs so her daughter wouldn't hear. He thought about the careful way she moved around him, always professional, always keeping her personal life separate. Now he understood. Why? I understand, Marcus said. Now tell me what we need to do. Marcus had barely finished his morning coffee when his mother appeared at his front door without warning, as was her way. Margaret Chun had a key and the unsettling ability to arrive at the most inconvenient moments. Marcus, darling, you look terrible, she announced, sweeping into his foyer in her signature black designer coat. Are you eating properly? Sleeping enough? And why haven't you returned my calls? Hello, Mother, Marcus said wearily. Elena's in the kitchen if you want to avoid her. Avoid her? Why would I avoid Elena? She's the only person in this house with any sense. Margaret paused, her sharp eyes narrowing. Although now that you mention it, she did seem distressed. When I saw her at the market yesterday. Before Marcus could respond, the sound of Elena's voice drifted from the kitchen, speaking rapid Spanish. She was on the phone, and even without understanding the words, Marcus could hear the stress in her tone. Margaret, however, had learned Spanish during her years as a social worker before marrying Marcus's father. Her expression darkened as she listened. Marcus, she said quietly, that woman is in trouble. Elena appeared in the doorway, having ended her call. She looked surprised to see Margaret, quickly smoothing her expression into its usual professional mask. Mrs. Chun, I didn't know you were visiting. I can come back later. Nonsense, Margaret interrupted, studying Elena with the intensity that had made her both feared and beloved in social services. Was that your brother on the phone? Elena's composure slipped. You speak Spanish? Fluently. And from what I heard, Carlos is worried about you and Sophia. Margaret's voice softened. Mia, you can't handle this alone. To Marcus's amazement, Elena's carefully maintained walls crumbled at the gentle use of the endearment. She sank into a chair, looking defeated. Carlos wants me to take Sophia and move in with him and Maria, Elena said quietly. He says David won't find us in Oakland, that I should stop trying to fight this legally and just disappear. But you don't want to run, Margaret observed. If I run, David wins. Sophia loses her school, her friends, her stability, and I lose. Elena glanced at Marcus, then looked away. I lose everything I've built here. Margaret followed Elena's gaze, and Marcus saw understanding dawn in his mother's eyes. "Ah," she said simply. "Mother," Marcus warned, recognizing that tone. "Elena, dear, may I ask you something?" Margaret ignored her son entirely. "How much do you need for legal fees?" "Mrs. Chun, I couldn't possibly. That wasn't what I asked." Margaret's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to getting answers. "How much?" Elena's hands twisted in her lap. "My lawyer says 15,000 would cover everything through the final custody hearing. But I've already spent more than I should have. And David's lawyer keeps filing motions that cost more money to respond to. It's like he knows exactly how to bleed me dry." "Because he does know," Margaret said grimly. "Financial abuse is textbook manipulation. He's counting on you running out of resources before he runs out of malice." Marcus stared at his mother. "How do you know about 23 years in social services, darling? I've seen this pattern dozens of times." Margaret turned back to Elena. "The question is, are you willing to let Marcus help you?" "I can't take charity," Elena said firmly. "Who said anything about charity?" Margaret asked. "Marcus, you've been complaining for months that you need a property manager for your rental investments. Elena, you're clearly overqualified for just housekeeping. Why not make this a business arrangement?" Marcus caught on immediately. A live-in property manager position. You'd handle tenant relations, maintenance coordination, rent collection. The salary would be enough to cover your legal fees and then some. "But I don't know anything about property management," Elena protested. "You know about people, organization, and problem solving," Margaret said briskly. "The rest you can learn. And the position comes with housing, that beautiful guest house in Marcus's backyard has been sitting empty for 2 years. Elena looked between them, hope and suspicion warring in her expression. "Why would you do this?" Margaret and Marcus exchanged a look. Finally, Margaret spoke. "Because sometimes we need to be saved, and sometimes we need to do the saving. Right now, you need both." Just then, Elena's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and paled. "It's Sophia's school," she answered with shaking hands. "Hello? What? When? I'll be right there. What happened?" Marcus asked as Elena grabbed her purse. "David showed up at Sophia's school. He tried to check her out for a dental appointment. They didn't let him take her, but Sophia is crying and asking for me." Elena's voice broke. "He's escalating, just like Detective Murphy said he would." Margaret stood up, her expression fierce. "Marcus, get your car keys. Elena, call your brother and tell him to meet us at the school. If David Torres wants a fight, he's about to get one, but not with a scared, isolated woman. He's going to face all of us." The scene at Sophia's elementary school was tense when Marcus, Elena, and Margaret arrived. Carlos Martinez was already there, a broad-shouldered man in work, clothes who looked like he'd rather be swinging a hammer than dealing with lawyers and custody disputes. He was standing protectively near the school office, while 8-year-old Sophia clung to her teacher's hand, her dark eyes wide with confusion. "Mommy!" Sophia ran to Elena the moment she saw her, burying her face in her mother's shirt. "It's okay, mi amor," Elena whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. "Everything's going to be okay. Why did Poppy want to take me to the dentist when my teeth don't hurt?" Sophia asked, her voice muffled. Before Elena could answer, a familiar voice cut through the afternoon air. "Because your mother has been lying to you about me, sweetheart." David Torres emerged from behind a row of parked cars, his appearance carefully calculated to look non-threatening. He was handsome in a conventional way, tall, well-dressed, with the kind of smile that had probably charmed his way out of trouble his entire life. But Marcus noticed how Elena instinctively stepped back, positioning herself between David and Sophia. "David, you can't be here," Elena said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. The restraining order doesn't apply to my daughter's school, David interrupted smoothly. I have every right to see Sophia. In fact, my lawyer says I have a very good case for emergency custody, even your instability. Carlos stepped forward, his fists clenched. You son of a... Carlos, no, Elena said quickly. That's what he wants. David's smile widened. Smart woman. Though not smart enough to keep her personal problems from affecting her work. His gaze shifted to Marcus. You must be the employer. Sean, right? I hope Elena told you about her little breakdown. Very unprofessional. Crying at work. Makes you. Wonder what other poor decisions she's making. Marcus felt anger surge through him, but Margaret placed a warning hand on his arm. Mr. Torres, she said in the crisp voice she'd once used to intimidate uncooperative bureaucrats. I'm Margaret Chun, and you're trespassing. Actually, I'm on public property visiting my daughter, David replied, but something in Margaret's tone made him less certain. Visiting? Margaret pulled out her phone. Because what you're doing looks more like harassment to me. Elena, did you record your ex-husband's threats at the school last week? Elena nodded, pulling out her own phone with shaking hands. David's composure slipped slightly. That's illegal recording. California is a two-party consent state for private conversations. A new voice interrupted. Rebecca Stone approached the group with the confident stride of someone comfortable in conflict. Marcus had called his lawyer friend on the drive over, and she'd agreed to meet them. But threatening behavior in public places? That's fair game. Rebecca was a small woman with steel-gray hair and the kind of presence that made opposing lawyers nervous. She looked David Torres up and down like he was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. Double quotes, Mr. Torres, I presume? I'm Rebecca Stone, Miss Rodriguez's new legal counsel. I understand you've been making threats about custody arrangements? Threats? David laughed, but it sounded forced. I'm simply trying to protect my daughter from an unstable environment. Elena works multiple jobs, can barely afford her apartment, and apparently has emotional breakdowns at work. What judge wouldn't see that she's unfit? The kind of judge who understands the difference between financial struggle and unfitness, Rebecca replied coolly. Especially when that financial struggle is directly caused by your deliberate sabotage of her employment opportunities. David's mask slipped further. I have no idea what you're talking about, don't you? Elena, would you care to tell everyone about the phone calls Mr. Torres made to your previous employers? Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. He called the Johnson family and told them I was stealing. The Garcia family got a call saying I was using drugs. I lost 3 clients in 1 week because of his lies. Those are serious accusations, David said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. Elena has always been creative with the truth. That's when Sophia spoke up, her small voice cutting through the adult tension. Poppy, why are you saying mean things about Mommy? She doesn't. Lie. She works really hard to take care of me. David's expression softened as he looked at his daughter, and for a moment, Marcus could see the charm that had probably attracted Elena years ago. Sweetheart, grown-ups sometimes disagree about things. I just want what's best for you. Then, why did you make Mommy cry? Sophia asked with the devastating honesty of a child. The question hung in the air like a challenge. David looked around at the faces surrounding him. Elena's fear, Carlos's anger, Margaret's disapproval, Rebecca's professional contempt, and Marcus's protective stance. For the first time, he seemed to realize he was outnumbered. This isn't over, he said quietly, but the threat lacked its earlier confidence. Sophia is my daughter too, and I won't let you turn her against me. No one's turning her against you, David, Elena said, finding her voice. But I won't let you turn her into a weapon against me either. As David walked away, Marcus realized something had shifted. Elena was no longer the frightened woman hiding. In his closet, surrounded by people who cared about her, she'd found her strength again. "Come on," Margaret said practically. "Let's get Sophia some ice cream and discuss our next steps. Rebecca, I assume you'll need documentation of everything?" As they walked toward Marcus's car, Sophia tugged on his sleeve. "Are you my mammy's friend?" she asked. Marcus looked at Elena, who was finally smiling for the first time in days. "Yes," he said simply. "I'm your mammy's friend." 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the guest house as Elena finished packing the last box of their old apartment. The custody hearing had been 3 weeks ago, and Judge Patricia Williams had ruled decisively in Heiss. Elena's favor, citing David's pattern of harassment and manipulation as evidence of his unfitness for custody. "Mommy, Marcus is making pancakes." Sophia called from the main house, where she'd been helping Margaret set up the celebration brunch. Elena smiled, looking around the small but comfortable space that had become their sanctuary. The guest house had been more than just a safe place to live. It had been where she'd learned to trust again, where Sophia had found stability, and where she'd discovered that accepting help wasn't the same as being weak. "Coming, mi amor," she called back, but paused to look at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was different from the one who'd been crying in Marcus's closet 6 months ago. This woman stood straighter, smiled more easily, and no longer flinched when the phone rang. In the main house, she found a scene of comfortable chaos. Margaret was directing Marcus and Carlos in setting up tables on the back patio, while Sophia helped Maria Santos, Alana's new friend and neighbor, arrange flowers. Detective Murphy was there too, officially off duty, but still keeping a protective eye on the proceedings. "Elena," Maria called out, "come help me tell these men how to properly set a table." Elena laughed, joining the group on the patio. Over the months, this unlikely collection of people had become her chosen family, Marcus with his quiet strength, Margaret with her fierce protectiveness, Carlos with his unwavering support, Murphy with his steady presence, and Maria with her warm friendship. "So what's the verdict?" Rebecca Stone asked, arriving fashionably late with a bottle of champagne. "Has our girl officially become the most successful property manager in San Francisco?" "Hardly," Elena protested, but she was smiling. A property management job had turned out to be perfect for her skills, and Marcus's rental properties had never been better maintained. More importantly, it had given her financial independence and professional confidence. "The tenant satisfaction surveys disagree," Marcus said, appearing at her elbow with a cup of coffee prepared exactly how she liked it. "You've got a waiting list of people wanting to rent from us just because they've heard about your management style." "Speaking of management styles," Margaret interrupted with a meaningful look, "when are you two going to stop pretending this is purely professional?" Elena felt her cheeks warm. Over the months, her relationship with Marcus had evolved, gradually from employer-employee to something much deeper. They'd grown closer through late-night conversations about their respective divorces, through the shared stress of the custody battle, and through the simple daily intimacy of sharing the same space. "Mother," Marcus warned, but he was smiling. "Two." "What?" "I'm just saying that Sophia asked me yesterday when you're going to marry her mommy, and it's not fair to keep an 8-year-old in suspense." Sophia, who had been eavesdropping with the skill of all children, chose that moment to run over and hug Elena. "Mommy, are you going to marry Marcus? Because that would be really cool." Elena looked around at the faces of the people who'd become her family, at the life she built from the ashes of her old one, and felt something she hadn't experienced in years: pure happiness. "Well," she said, looking at Marcus with a smile that held all the love she'd been afraid to voice, "I suppose we should discuss that." Marcus set down his coffee and took her hands. "Elena Rodriguez, you came into my life as my housekeeper, became my business partner, and somewhere along the way became the most important person in my world. I don't want to live in a house that doesn't have you and Sophie in it. Is that a proposal? Elena asked, her heart racing. It's a beginning, Marcus replied. The rest is up to us. As their friends and family cheered around them, Elena realized that she'd never have to hide her tears again, not because she wouldn't cry, but because now she had people who would help her through whatever came next. Sophia tugged on both their hands. Does this mean we get to keep the guest house? Elena and Marcus looked at each other and burst out laughing. Actually, Marcus said, I was thinking we might want to look into the main house. It's got plenty of room for a family. As they stood together on the patio, surrounded by the people who'd helped them find each other, Elena thought about the woman who'd been sobbing in a closet 6 months ago. That woman had been broken, scared, and alone. This woman was loved, supported, and ready for whatever came next. Sometimes, she reflected, the best things in life began with falling apart completely, because it was only when you'd lost everything that you could truly appreciate finding it all again, and more than you'd ever dared to hope for.